my name's Val Innes and I'm Head of Next Generation Qualifications and Standards here at SQA. I'm joined by a few of my colleagues today, and perhaps most excitingly, a colleague from the sector as well. So I'm going to say a few words about the NextGen project, our purpose, our design principles, etc. And then I will be handing over to Diane Scott. Diane is joining us from VSA SVQ Centre, and Diane has been delivering and has been involved in the design and the development of our HNC social services. So I know Diane is the person that you are all here to hear from today, and we'll be looking forward to hearing her experiences. And that's no pressure, Diane. I know it will be a good session. My colleague Gavin Mackey, who is a new product development manager within the NextGen team, is also going to speak about some of the resources that we have available to all. I realise that we might be covering quite a bit of ground and that you'll want the opportunity to ask questions as well. So as always, the chat function is open. If you do have something that you want to ask there, please do. If it's something that we can answer, you know, there are other colleagues from my team on the call as well, so we'll certainly do that. We are going to have a pause for questions after Diane's part of the conversation, and we will also hopefully have some time for questions at the end as well. So with that in mind, let's move on to the first slide proper. So I wanted to say a few words about our NextGen design principles. When the NextGen project started, one of the tasks we were given was to work I think with a bit of a challenge to all sectors we were operating in, to make sure that the design principles that had come out of the consultation phase were fit for purpose. We referred to them as our flexible fences, and that phrase, flexible fences, I think gave the expectation that they are there to be complied with, but they are also there to be challenged. The design principles themselves grew slightly throughout the development and piloting processes. So we know, for example, that learning for sustainability was not in there at the start of all developments. That need to include those opportunities to develop and engage with learning for sustainability was something that was incorporated after the first year of development, and really the steer from that came from our external reference and steering group. So direction from the sector was very much influencing our design principles there. So we recognise, obviously, HN qualifications as a whole, whether they're NextGen or not, are at least dual purpose. I would really say they have three purposes. We know that they are routes into work and are preparing our learners for the workplace. We know also that many of our qualifications are articulation pathways into higher education, and that should be higher education with advanced standing. We also know that HN qualifications are pieces of education in their own right. You could easily be studying because you have a passion for the subject and are not focused on higher education or work. But work and higher education are the two main missions. And NextGen HN is no different in that respect. Our HNCs and our HNDs are now designed to be individual qualifications in their own right. Each comprises 120 SEQF credit points at either level 7 or level 8. Our focus is on larger and fewer units, That is in part to address concerns about assessment load, but it is not just about reducing assessment. It is also about enriching the learner experience and creating more space to explore the qualification, the subject area in the round. I mentioned our incorporation of learning for sustainability. All qualifications now have that opportunity to engage with LFS. We have incorporated meta skills within our all qualifications as well. We looked at our new grading models. I mentioned previously the flexible fences. So in the beginning, we had different models, and we've moved away from the graded unit and are now looking at whole qualification grading. We've now settled on an approach to grading, so we're not talking about grading models plural. Although we were talking about various grading models, they all agreed to a set of core criteria or principles. So it is those guiding principles that are informing the grading model that is now applied. And last, but by no means least, we have a supportive approach to external quality assurance as well. So they are all the aspects of NextGen qualification that Diane and her colleagues, our teams, our learners have been engaging with throughout their journey. Next slide, please, Jordan. So at the heart of all we do in NextGen is collaboration. We would not be able to do much, if anything, without taking advice, soundings, genuinely working in partnership with not just the sector, and I'm saying the sector, that could be the college sector, it could be training providers or deliverers, but we recognise that there are a much wider group of stakeholders that all have their rightful place. They should have their voice heard in the development of our qualifications. They all have something to bring. So we've applied a service design-led approach, as I say, with collaboration at the heart. We naturally have our qualification design teams, and those design teams, our QDTs, are led by the qualifications manager. We have our, SQA team of staff in there working away, but we also make sure that we have the broadest possible range of experts on that group to make sure, that, as I say, they are representing their sector. So those QDT members, could be training providers, college representatives, etc. But we also include our higher education institutions. We recognise the role of professional associations and regulatory bodies. So obviously the SSSC are important in this space. We were meeting with the Scottish Government this morning around healthcare practice and recognising the role of NES, and a whole range of other professionals in that space. If we're talking about accountancy, then ACA and the other accountancy bodies are obviously really relevant there as well. Industry representation, employers, training providers, etc., all key stakeholders in that mix too. So that's what's going on in the QDT. We have critical friends. So again, our critical friends, could come from any of those groups, representative bodies that are there to check in with, to sense check our work, and again get that really essential feedback that we need to know that the approach that we are taking is the correct one. We have an external reference and steering group that has been there really from the start. That is comprised of, again, quite a wide range of individuals, each representing their own specific group or area of expertise. That includes Skills Development Scotland, the Funding Council. We have representatives from the college sector, from training providers, SCQF, Scottish Government, etc., are all members of that group as well. And last but not least, I mentioned again our quality assurance process. We recognise that our SQA appointees are absolutely in that mix as well. And we are taking feedback from our quality assurance processes, those that are engaged with it, our unit writers, our creators too. The final group to get a mention are our learners. And this is something that I think we are particularly proud of. All learners on all NextGen qualifications in the pilot phase have been invited to 2 focus groups per year. The vast majority of those focus groups are in person. The ones that are not in person are simply at the request of the delivering centre. So we have that opportunity to hear directly from all learners and to take their voice back into the mix too. And there have been changes to the qualifications made as a result of that feedback. So thanks, Jordan. If we go on to the next one, thanks. So I'm going to stop there. I gave Diane quite a big build up in my introduction. I'm sure Diane will not disappoint. So over to yourself, Diane, so we can all hear about your experience.
Thanks, Val. So some of you might be familiar with VSA, but if not, we're a large social care charity based in Aberdeen. We've been around since 1870, which is over 150 years, so a long time, supporting individuals through mental health and wellbeing support, adult and later years in life services, learning disability services, and children and family services. So we've been an approved centre since 1999. Offering a range of qualifications relevant to social services. We first started delivering the HNC in social care in 2005. We became a pilot centre for NextGen in 2022, and I was invited to join the QDT for that. We've had 2 successful years of delivery so far, with positive feedback from managers of the services within the organisation, as well as our learners. We have enjoyed delivering the NextGen HNC. It's very different to the traditional HNC. And we feel that the project approach enables learners to make a real difference to individuals who use services, as well as benefit their own development. Next slide, please. So here's some of the key differences. The NextGen principles allow centres to move away from a unit-by-unit approach to delivery and assessment. The units are fewer but larger, which allows for integration. We found a thematic approach to delivery worked really well. I'll go over this a bit later because it's worth kind of going into a bit more detail about. The removal of the graded unit means that grading is no longer end-loaded. The learners receive feedback on what grade they're working towards throughout their award and can make adjustments to improve their grades over time. Removing the graded unit has also reduced over-assessment for our qualification. Although meta skills are new to this level of qualification, learners have taken to meta skills and accepted this outcome as part of their course. It helps significantly if they're introduced right at the beginning and discussed throughout the course as well. It's definitely worth prompting them to record their meta skills development. Learning for sustainability is very, very relevant and can easily be integrated with other outcomes due to its diverse applications. For social services, we integrated the outcome with the topics of social policy and health inequalities. So this integrated seamlessly into an existing assessment because it was introduced in the second year. Learners didn't feel it was out of place at all, or didn't feel it was anything extra that they had to do. It worked quite well in that assessment that we planned for. Next slide, please. So some challenges and approaches. So one of the most time-consuming projects was designing the integrated assessments, but it was worth spending that time prior to delivery and planning the assessments. This reduced the need to make any changes later during delivery and ensure that we were avoiding any over-assessing. We timetabled a thematic approach to delivery, so we'd introduce a topic through a digital learning resource. Then learners would attend a face-to-face tutorial on that subject. Tutorials were every 3 weeks, and the full course lasted 13 months as a part-time distance learning model. All our learners are employees of our organisation, so we could work really closely with the managers to monitor the progress. We integrated study time into the timetable, which is a bit of a fight to get, to be honest, and agreed this in advance. Emma, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Diane. And I know Val said we had a question and answers session after Diane finished, but for those who don't know me, my name's Emma Campos, and I'm one of the new product development managers that has been working alongside Diane with the HNC Social Services. And I'm just really keen for you to share as well with everyone, because one of the design principles is digital by default in NextGen qualifications. So I thought it would be really good, Diane, if you could maybe expand a wee bit more on the digital solutions that you have used with the NextGen qualification as part of your delivery.
Yeah, sure. So we've trialed a few different applications to support this. We used an e-authoring tool for our learning resources. So this moved away from the traditional paper-based resources that we used to use. And it's so much sleeker. It works really well. It's so easy to transfer from paper. And it allows for different types of media to be displayed. So like videos or documents can be embedded in the resource as well. Without having to put links into everything that you want them to look at, you know. We can also check learners' progress and their answers to make sure that they're on the right lines. And we also used MS Teams for the last couple of years as a LMS. However, we found that quite cumbersome. So we're now trialing e-portfolios. We've used e-portfolios for a long time, and because much of the HNC is portfolio-based, social services portfolio-based, it makes sense to use this resource. So we've been using it for the last month. It seems to be going well, but we'll keep monitoring it and see how it goes. But yeah, definitely, I think the biggest benefit was having the e-authoring tool for the learning resources. Next slide. I thought it was worth going into a bit of assessment planning, because this is something that we spent a lot of time on, and we've had really good feedback from our EQAs, which we'll go into a bit later, about our integrated assessments as well. So it was definitely one of the larger tasks, but spending that time at the beginning is definitely worth it, you know, I would say. So when we were looking at it, we considered factors such as the assessment strategy for the word, obviously. The NextGen Social Services assessment strategy divided the HN content into 3 or 4 projects. And the award is heavily based on evidence of practical work with supporting individuals. So it also has themes of reflective practice, and there's also the knowledge applied to practice as well. So the units required integration. So we sorted the evidence requirements by topic and the type of evidence, whether it's knowledge or product. And then we looked for similarities and grouped them into projects. Or tasks or assignments which would occur naturally in their placement or their work situation. Next slide, please. So here you can see how the outcomes have been grouped together into projects. These projects have been split into 7 manageable assessments. So you can split the units into evidence requirements instead if you wanted, which would actually help make sure that all the evidence requirements are met. Whenever you integrate assessments, I'd recommend having good mapping on the assessments as well, because that makes sure that evidence is traceable and fully covered. And it's just that extra layer of making sure everything is there. The planning process took some time. However, with good planning, you can adapt the model for different optional units. So there can be a range of evidence types used based on the requirements of the assessment strategy. And in this case, the evidence types reflect evidence which can naturally be gathered from the workplace through projects. So the model works really well with holistic verification as well. That's something that we have found. So where internal verification is undertaken by assessment type rather than on a unit by unit basis, it can be very difficult to verify on a unit by unit basis because of the size of the units and the different topics that are involved in each unit. And I'll go into topics a little bit later as well. Internal verification can be undertaken holistically using the VARX process that way. So makes it easier doing it that way. SQA have produced some guidance, and there's SQA Academy modules on assessment, which we have used, and I would say they're really useful for centres which are new to integration as well. Next slide. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about grading because it is so different this time. So our grading model assesses performance through a set of criteria based on the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the learner. Performance is assessed holistically throughout the award through interim grading schedules. We have 2 interim grading schedules and then a final grading. Each interim grading feedback session, learners are made aware of their grade and where their strengths and weaknesses are. So that means they've got the opportunity to develop a bit further and improve their grade over time as they progress. The grading is based on a folder of evidence that they maintain. So that includes their meta skills, self-assessment, plan and development, any project work that they've done, witness testimonies, and any sort of products that they've produced in their work, which can actually be quite good evidence as well. So to grade against this criteria, I used a number of sources within that evidence folder that the learners produced, and also the marking feedback. We found that the more detailed the marking feedback, the easier the process of grading can be, because then you can reflect on the marking that's been there. So we kind of made sure that our marking feedback was quite detailed as well, especially for each evidence requirement. And then if there was any sort of part towards the grading criteria, we would sort of highlight that as we went as well. So for each criterion, we looked at sources of evidence. For example, in that first criterion, the personal values and principles, there's evidence for that based in our developing reflective practice unit, which is one of the units within NextGen. And we would expect learners to embed their values and principles in their practice and reflect on this through their work. So to grade each learner, we asked questions such as, how well did the learner describe their own personal values and principles? And also, is there evidence of their values and principles embedded in their project work? So we carried out same sort of process for the next 9 criteria. There was a lot of support for grading during the pilot, including a standardisation of grading decisions with other pilot centres, which was really useful. I think going in and it's a new grading process, you do become a bit sort of second guessing yourself as you go along, but having that standardisation kind of confirmed that everybody was thinking the same thing. So it was a really good exercise. The grading pack provided by SQA is really useful as well. There's a lot of detail there about how to make the grading decisions and what specifically you're looking for. So we refer to that regularly during the grading process. Next slide, please. So this slide indicates how a schedule for a assessment and grading might work. So the buttons there are an example of assessments, and the arrows indicate the grading schedule and what might be taken into account in each interim grading feedback. So the units can be quite large and cover a number of different topics. For example, our assessment approaches to assessment unit covers psychology and sociology, plus a few other topics as well embedded in there. So what we did was we timetabled the teaching into these topics to ensure that they were given enough emphasis throughout the award. We ensured that each assessment followed the topics relevant to that assessment. So this meant that there was more teaching earlier on in the delivery and time for learners to work on a larger project later on in delivery. To meet the outcome of meta skills, we introduced the self-assessment very early on in the period of delivery. So the meta skills development can continue throughout the year with an evaluation towards the end. There may be the opportunity to embed meta skills into assessments as well. What we did was we integrated the meta skills outcome with related outcomes, and it spread the assessment of meta skills throughout the period of delivery. So this allowed learners time to self-assess, plan, develop, and evaluate their meta skills, with some prompting when it came to the development stage throughout. So it's worth timetabling your grading with set dates. The interim grading is best completed as a delivery team when there's enough evidence, assessment evidence, to make the grading decisions. It does mean that not all grading criteria need to be completed at each interim grading, as you're estimating the grades based on the criteria that they've covered so far. For example, there's a couple of grading criteria in our model which won't come into the assessments towards the end of the award. So therefore, we complete that criteria only during the final grading, when there's sufficient evidence to make a judgment. So for an example, our pilot year runs from August to August, and our interim grading was scheduled for 18th of January and the 31st of May. So you can see where the evidence may come in there. So we also tied it in with our verification schedule, where we normally have sampling by the verifier. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what I was saying for 3 of the criteria there. So you can see that there might be gaps in evidence at stages of interim grading. So in our model, there should normally be evidence for the first criteria, personal values and principles, prior to the first grading. But other criterion like engagement with the individual and others, which is later in the number of criteria, it's not evidence till later in the awards. So, but the interim grading is designed to give learners an indication of how they're doing and areas to improve on. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the outcomes that we found for NextGen have been reduced assessment and therefore marking, which is always good news. More teaching time, more time to focus on the VQ units which form part of our award. The assessments demonstrate learners' knowledge and skills in a meaningful manner, and there's more focus on outcomes from learning. And for social services, the benefit to employers or individuals who access care, because it's something meaningful that they're putting in place for an individual. Emma, you've got a question?
Thanks. Sorry, me again. I'm just very intrigued because you've said so many positive things about the delivery, and it's so great to see the journey. I know I've been with you together with that journey, but seeing it all kind of in this presentation is just great. And obviously you've mentioned some of the outcomes from it, but what would you say has been your highlight from being involved in piloting the NextGen qualifications, if you could pick one?
I think one that comes to mind, due to, there was quite a few projects that were completed recently, is like the real benefit to individuals who receive care from the projects that the learners have completed. So there's a couple that stand out for me, and one of them, instead of the learner sort of focusing on one aspect of somebody's care, he really looked at the opportunities that could help him holistically. So he looked at every part of the person's life and looked at all these different options that would help him. Some of it was to do with finances. It was mainly to do with mental health and how to improve that, and things like the simple things like he wanted to go on a trip to Peterhead prison for some reason. But even like an outing like that, it was part of it, and he really looked at everything there. And some of his work that he did, it kind of influenced how the actual service. and how they support workers to have a more active role in the care planning process. So it was quite beneficial to the service as well as the individual as well. There's a few more, but I wouldn't like to go into too much detail about it. But there's been some great work that's come out of it, really beneficial to the individuals that we support. So other things as well, the project allows for a more varied approach to gathering evidence. So because most of our award is projects and it's portfolio based, this allows for a variety of methods, and that includes products for work practice, which can be really meaningful sources of evidence as well. So for that example that I gave, the person had used a recovery plan. So that was that could be then used as a product along with risk assessments and things like that. So it's really sort of meaningful products and therefore evidence towards the HNC that they're putting together. We also found that there's really good learner engagement. So they really engage well with the learning and the project approach. I think meta skills encourage more ownership and planning of their own learning. The grading may be helping with the level of engagement as well, because they're seeing the grades as they go along and they might engage more if they know they're on the right path. There's also more reflection and evaluation of practice within our award anyway, and learners and their managers have reflected on the benefits to the service and the organisation from their staff participating in the HNC. So next slide. So finally, I've got some hints and tips for some centres new to the award. I'd recommend looking at all the core units and your optional units that are relevant to your delivery and split them into themes or topics for teaching. Look for opportunities for integration of assessment and how assessment can be carried out through meaningful tasks or projects. It can take some time to do this, as I think I've maybe said already, but it did take us about a couple of months to do. And writing the assessments and everything, it could take some time. But once it was done, we could easily swap out the optional units due to the way the integration was designed. And meta skills and learning for sustainability are best embedded in assessments with other outcomes. So you might find it useful to schedule prompts and record meta skills development, as learners do tend to think that they have ages to complete this task and will leave it till the end. So as we found, I think other pilot centres have found that as well. I'd recommend considering when you will deliver the assessments and scheduling your interim grading based on that, based on when you've got enough evidence to make a grading decision. Also, user resources and training available on the SQA website. The model for quality assurance has also been changed. I think Val had mentioned that earlier, for the NextGen pilot delivery. So it's more supportive throughout the year. There's touch point sessions. So I think we had maybe 2 or 3 touch point sessions before the final grading. But it was much more supportive. And you felt that you were working more in partnership with your EV, who for the NextGen is called an external quality assurer, or EQA. They were just really useful in ensuring that we were on the right track as well. But overall, yeah, it's definitely been a positive move doing the NextGen and we've been involved in that. And I think that's recognised by the organisation as well as ourselves. We prefer to deliver it. It's a bit more sort of flexible than previous HNCs.
Thank you, Diane. I found that really interesting, and I have some questions of my own, but I realise I don't want to hog that space, so I'm absolutely going to open up to everybody on the call to either pop a question in the chat or just stick your hand up, and now's your chance to ask Diane anything that's relevant to her delivery. I am going to ask my question then, if no other hands are going up. Diane, I was struck by the amount of very personal dialogue that you're having with your individual learners. And I wondered if there is anything that you as a group of deliverers have changed in your own practice as a result of those conversations.
In terms of our delivery, we probably change things all the time, so maybe because of pilot as well, but we've adapted things over time, One of the things we did get feedback on was, and it was just informal, one of our learners had said about teams, and we were actually finding some issues with it as well, that the way there was getting to be loads and loads of different versions of work, so it was getting very complicated. So we did sort of reflect on that, and I think by that time we'd already decided to move away from it. Because we're not like a college, so we don't have like the education version of Teams either. So that's a bit of an issue. So it was a kind of workaround, but yeah, we definitely, that kind of helped sway us towards the e-portfolios as well. I don't know about our actual practice, but I think, yeah, we've just adapted things as we went along, and it was, I think the interim grading is quite a big change as well, because you're sitting with them as you're going through. So it's almost like a more formal feedback than what you would normally have done. So I think that kind of changed in our practice as well. And I think you always try and keep a positive spin on it, like, you've got this much opportunity, this is where you can improve and things. So yeah, that was slightly different, I think, than one of the biggest differences as well in our practice. But yeah, we've enjoyed it as we've gone along. It's very different.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. I'm going to give a last call to anybody else for any questions they may have. And if I don't see any hands go up, I'm just going to hand over to Gavin. Okay, let's hand over to Gavin.
Thanks, Val. Good afternoon, everyone. So just to introduce myself, first of all, my name is Gavin Mackey. Similar to Emma, I'm one of the new product managers within NextGen. So fortunately, Diane's actually gone through a lot of the kind of benefits and a lot of the resources available to you through NextGen. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes now just to kind of signpost you where we can find the most useful resources. As we go through the slides, probably worth mentioning just now, we won't bring up kind of screenshots of the resources. The whole idea behind that is Jordan will pop links into the chat, and that gives you the opportunity to then go and explore the links and use them in a bit more detail. So the first link we have there is kind of the main central part of it, and it's just the NextGen HN web page. As it kind of says that it's the kind of central hub to that, and that's where you'll initially find a lot of your resources that you may be looking for, whether that's on meta skills, evaluation, learning for sustainability. They all are in there. There'll be 8 tiles, and you'll be able to navigate through that with relative ease. Some of the materials after that I'll touch on in a bit more detail as well, but yeah, that's the kind of central hub in terms of locating it all to start with. The next point, just to mention there, is course documents. So on your course documents, you'll find a list of all the different qualifications within NextGen, and on there you'll have your mandatory and optional units will be listed for both HNCs and HNDs, and like I said, that'll have all the qualifications there, again, which will be relevant to your industry, to have a look at that, and you'll find the information on there. So that's the main web page and the course documents. Jordan, if you want to go into the next part there. Great, thank you. Okay, so the next part there, Dan mentioned quite a lot there around meta skills, and there is a whole section on meta skills, again, found on the web page. So there'll be kind of useful videos, there'll be kind of quotes, there'll be stories from centres and learners ourselves, but more importantly as well, in terms of resource and support for everyone, there's also support for learners and practitioners on there. So there'll be lots of different kind of links to different tools they can use for their own kind of evaluation, but also to help practitioners deliver that as well. There'll then be videos with a bit more information, and then relating to, again, all the qualifications, there'll be a bit more in practice and how meta skills actually looks in practice as well. The next part is learning for sustainability. So very similar to meta skills, you'll have a separate tile for learning for sustainability within the main web page. And again, that will talk through, again, useful resources, useful links, and posters and things relating to learning for sustainability. It also gives blogs and case studies, which I'll touch on in a little second, and talks about external resources and further links towards learning for sustainability as well. Different centres have found that particularly useful when they've maybe struggled to find how they can incorporate that into the qualification. Sometimes it's going through that has been extremely helpful for them to do that. So the next part there, we'll go through. If just next slide. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So we've now got the SQ Academy modules. So that'll be an interactive tool, again, that can be found through the website, and you'll have a list of all the different learning modules, again, for certain subjects, but also for learning sustainability, quality assurance, assessment, and it takes you through that as well. A relatively new feature as well is subject-specific courses as well. So that'll let you see all the different kind of specific courses on there, and it'll talk you through in a more interactive format, and it lets you go through at your own pace and revisit that and stop and continue as well at the same bits you've been into. So that's the SQ Academy, so definitely worth having a look through there. On top of that as well, there is external links to other parts on the learning module, so it's worth having a look through all the content on there and taking a little bit of time to do that. And then finally, just if we move on to the next slide, we've just got any further reading at all. So the first one that's worth looking into is various blogs around NextGen. So over the course of the year and during different times, we'll actually reach out to whether it's certain people within the industry, through different centres and pilot centres, and also internally to SQA. And we'll talk about our own experiences in the format of our blog, how we find different things, ranging from innovation to engagement with learners, to validation. There's lots on there around different blogs and different themes. And then just finally case studies, so a similar format, but again talking through various things that they found helpful beforehand, again, whether that's a case of how to incorporate meta skills or collaboration with maybe CDN, and also using the digital assessment tools as well. And that's again an area we can pick up to find out more information about from your peers and colleagues and how they've found working with NextGen qualifications. So hopefully that's a kind of very brief overview, but like I said, the idea around providing the actual links in the chat is to give you that time to go through that, spend a bit of time finding out what helps and sharing with colleagues as well, who will be on today's call, about the different kind of learnings from there. And I can see that's Jordan just popped, I think, the links in just now. So just before I hand back to Val, just to double check, there's no any questions on any of the links? No. So if we just go into the very next slide then, that just talks about if there is anything that pops into your head after this call, or when you're actually accessing the links, if any of that, you need further assistance on or further support on, or it's just general feedback, feel free to reach out to us in the normal email basket or contact us through the NextGen website as well. And hopefully that's useful and gives you a little insight into some of the resources available. I'll just pass back to you now, Val.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gavin. So I realise we are almost bang on time, which is, I think, if not a first for us, it's certainly good going. So we definitely do have time for one or two questions. If anybody has anything they would like to ask, please do just stick your hand up.